Welcome to Lasting Impressions with Lauren, the podcast where we explore the art of making a memorable impact in every encounter. I'm your host, Lauren Hanna, Director of First Impressions at Real News PR. Join me each week as we sit down with a diverse range of guests, from industry leaders to everyday influencers, to explore their insights, experiences, and strategies for making memorable impressions. So whether you're looking to enhance your professional presence, elevate your personal brand, or simply leave a positive impact on those around you, this is your go-to destination for all things impression management. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered to make every interaction count. Welcome to the podcast where impressions aren't just made, they last. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lasting Impressions with Lauren. Today, I am super excited about the conversation we're going to have. It's all about mental health. And I am so excited to introduce you to Meagan Butler. She is the co-founder and chief clinical innovation officer for Lucero. She's also a psychotherapist, educator, and innovator, and can't wait for you to learn from her and learn about all the amazing work that she's doing in the mental health landscape, especially for the youth. It's such a critical conversation right now, and Meagan is really making waves in the industry. So Meagan, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you. Meagan is in our Austin studio, RNC at Austin. Meagan, how are you today?
I'm so great. I'm so happy to be here. This is so awesome.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you. Super ready to dig in. You have such an inspiring journey and really inspiring work that you're doing. So I was talking to you earlier. I think it's so great that you had such early ambition in your younger years. You wanted to be the first female Dr. Ballerina in space. So tell us about your journey from, being young and just having all of these ambitions to co-founding a digital mental health platform.
Wow. So it has been quite the journey. When I was little, yes, I did want to be the first Dr. Ballerina in space. I think it's really funny because I often would say the first female Dr. Ballerina in space. So I had this idea that like a man was going to do this first. And I think I had that idea because I had two older brothers and I was like, one of them might do it first, They are so awesome. I grew up in Austin. My parents are educators. I'm so grateful for them. My mom was a middle school math teacher. So she taught for 40 years, and was Texas Teacher of the Year. So I learned so much from her. I ended up going into the family business of education. So I was a school teacher. I taught 8 miles from the border of Texas and Mexico. And it was beautiful, beautiful town, EdCal to Elsa. And I was a writing teacher. And so I started out 6th grade writing, just connecting with the kids. I felt so inspired by their stories. A lot of them were migrant farm workers that would work before school and pick onions before school. And then they would come to my class. And I just thought, these kids have done more before 8 a.m. than most people do all day.
Yeah.
And I saw their resiliency and just their drive to want to learn. And I also saw these layers of poverty and some trauma that they faced. And I was more interested in helping with that side of things than in like teaching comma rules, right? Like I think teachers are incredible. But I just knew I had like a higher calling to do something different. So I ended up getting a degree in counseling. I went to UT, Hook 'em Horn. We're right here, the capital.
Yes. I love it.
And so I went to UT for counseling, and then that took me into this mental health field. So graduated in 2010, and ever since then have been just deeply involved in the mental health system. And it's been a wild ride. So, I was a school counselor for 8 years, did a lot of innovative work, a lot of hands-on mental health work, supporting high schoolers. And from there, I saw the reality of the crisis, like knee to knee. And so these are real families that we were dealing with. It wasn't just like this, grad school, what you learn about. It was real. Mm-hmm. And deeply, deeply impacted me. When I was at the school, I also sponsored the LGBTQ Pride Club. And so I got to eat lunch with kids once a week for an hour and just hear their stories. And so I saw the power of stories. And that's why I think what you're doing is really cool, because you're just like, let's hear some more stories. Let's bring more stories into the world. I think just listening to each other and hearing that story can be really healing for people to come together. And I saw the power of that community healing happen in school spaces. And then eventually I was promoted to central office. And so I helped supervise and support hundreds of school counselors with their counseling programming and their training. We passed some policies. I did district counseling work, just all over the place. And then I saw the mental health crisis at scale. So it was really serious, getting through COVID with these wonderful school counselors, but also just seeing, life and death happen in real time, right? We lost some students, we lost some teachers to mental health issues. And I just really felt like this is beyond what's normal. And we have to do something to get upstream. We have to do something that can work at scale. We have to bring mental health skill building to everyone. And so that brought me to Lucero.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think I 100% agree with you. I think shared experiences and just being able to relate to one another is so powerful. Especially, after COVID, I feel like people just kind of at this point, like we're past it. It's over now, but like it impacted obviously the entire world, but especially students, especially teachers. The level of education is just, was completely different for so long. And in the mental health aspect, I can only imagine as a kid, I can't imagine going through school during COVID, and how that affects your ability to learn. So I think it was absolutely great that you were in that space and, doing everything that you did to help in that moment.
It was such an interesting situation too, because we had to take all these amazing things that these school counselors were doing in real life, and then we had to translate them into the technology space. Like, how do we take your whole school counseling program and then do it online? Yeah. How do we take counseling interventions, crisis interventions? How do we do those online? And so I think it prepared me to be in this tech world because I had just done this large tech change, in the school counseling system. People got really creative too. That was the thing about working in the schools and getting to supervise so many folks, is that I got to see all the best strategies, tips, tricks. I got to just see them all. And people are incredible, right? It's one thing to know about, hey, this works in a grad school way, right? This works theoretically. It's another thing to see, like, this kid got better because of what this counselor did, right? And then to say, how can we take that skill, put it on an app for free for kids? How do we do that? So that's what we've been doing, is like taking all these wonderful tips and techniques and strategies that we've discovered and then giving them to the masses.
Absolutely. And I know you had, we had chatted, prior to this podcast about Lucero, and you were telling me, but for our audience, can you give us an intro and a description of the app and everything that y'all are looking to accomplish with the app?
Yes. So, we are digital behavioral health support for youth and families. And one of the key pieces of what our app does is helps people if they're struggling with outbursts, meltdowns, shutdowns, just all those hard moments, right? Like, how do we get through those hard times? We've got a lot of strategies in there. And so we had a team of therapists that I helped supervise. And then we had a team of youth, which are the most important people in the room. Yes. And we brought them together, and then they co-created all of the content in the app, right? So everything a therapist created, a youth had to approve it before it got in the app. It's also really gamified and fun. There's avatars and there's tokens you earn. And we asked youth what they wanted before we built it, right? And so I think that's what really makes us different, is that we built it with them instead of doing something to them. And that's just also been a common theme I've seen throughout my life, is that people with lived experience need to have a voice at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you had also shared with me that Lucero was founded along with you by veterans. So how would you say that that background has influenced the company, how the company operates and its overall mission?
Yes. So these folks are so incredible. Tom Murphy and Jeff Eastman and Jim Hoover are some of the original visionaries behind this. Two of them were Navy SEALs. They're in their 70s now, but they were SEALs for decades, right? And so they saw this trauma firsthand in their fellow military folks. And they said, what would it be like if the things we learned later in life, these mind, body, spirit principles, what would it be like if we had learned those as kids? And so that's where their energy came from for Lucero, was like, let's give all this enlightened information that we found later in life, and let's give it to kids early. And so I think we're very mission driven in that way. And that the people that had this original idea for Lucero are very much in line with what we're seeing in the clinical field and in the school fields. Like, we had the same idea that mind, body, spirit principles can absolutely transform lives and can prevent major mental health issues from even happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's mental health is obviously a very prevalent topic in the veteran community as well as for our youth today. And so I think that they took that initiative and said, let's use what we've learned and just give it to them early. The kids that, because kids are who really need it. And the earlier you expose them to the knowledge and the tools that can make their lives easier, the better it can be, and the better that their education can, the more that will benefit from that. So, and you had shared with me, it's designed for 11 to 14, but is really great for any, middle school, high school, any kid that's looking to learn.
So we start 8 and up, and that's because of the reading level. So anybody that's at, a second grade reading level, third grade reading level can access the app. We've had, our CEO has been using it with her kids that, they're 6, and it's highly effective with even younger kids. And then we have adults that use it, and they say it's incredible. So I think that's the thing about mental health skill building. It's mental health for everyone. We targeted that 11 to 13 because of the time of neurodevelopment and brain development. That is a key time where the brain is really mushy. And if you learn things then, it absolutely can change the trajectory of the whole brain development. And so it was very targeted, our timing on that, right? We're trying to get it when the brain is most likely to develop in the right way.
Absolutely. And I can only, from my experience, and I've talked to you briefly about this before, but I can only imagine having something like this in those crucial years, when you're trying to make sense of your feelings and why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting to my mom telling me this or to my friends doing this to me? And so I can only imagine how helpful it is to have a tool to help you understand those things. Would you say that if, you growing up in high school, was there anything that happened or maybe that you experienced that, Lucero would have been really beneficial to have?
Absolutely. So part of my story is just being a survivor myself. And I was a part of a community of survivors. So when I was in high school, I actually lost 2 classmates to suicide. And it was a very small school. There's about 100 people in the grade. So, losing anyone anytime is really hard, but especially when you're at a small school. And it was in the 90s, and we didn't really talk about mental health, right? It just wasn't really addressed. They announced it. There was a memorial service, and then it was just kind of business as usual, right? And I think that was incredibly hard for us. We didn't have the words to say, this is what depression looks like, or this is what anxiety looks like. We didn't have any of that framing that would have been really helpful to understand what a lot of us ended up going through. I definitely went through a depressive episode after all of that happened, and I didn't have the language for that. And I didn't have any skills or tools at all that were helpful, right? And even though my family members are educators and, highly educated and wonderful, they kind of grew up in a bootstraps era where it's just like, buck up, buttercup, like go cry in your room and like hope you feel better, but there wasn't like, here are things you can do to feel better. And so now we know more, right? We know more. And later on in life, my family, developed all these incredible social emotional learning skills that they share with everyone now. And my mom's incredible with that. But I think at the time, people didn't really know what to do, right? So I think mental health literacy, mental health awareness, the fact that it's happening in schools now, it brings me so much joy to know that people aren't suffering alone. I was so grateful, though, in high school that I found my own outlet and my own inspiration. And I found that in the art room. So I don't know if do you do any like painting or art making?
Actually. Yes. It's so funny that you bring that up. That was one of my main outlets in school as well. Cause even when I was in high school, which was like 2000s, 2010s, it was more of a conversation. It still wasn't much of a conversation, right? If you had to go see the counselor because you were having an issue, you were kind of looked at as like uncool and like, like, why do you need that extra help? And so, I remember, I was going through something, and I wouldn't say I went through a depressive episode, but I went through a lot of anger that was stemming from different experiences that I had, and I didn't know how to handle it. So my mom, she put me in therapy, traditional talk therapy. I grew up in East Texas, and so it was a religion-based therapist. And while I know that works for so many people, and it's such a beautiful thing if you're so established in your religion and that can be beneficial to you, it wasn't something that was helping me at the time. And so to have something, I think, that is centered in mind, body, and spirit, and having just something that makes sense, regardless if you're religious, if you're spiritual, that can help you out, I think is super important. And yes, art was a great outlet for me. Whenever, everything else wasn't working, I could just go in my room, distract myself with something. So absolutely amazing tool for sure.
You get it, right? And I love that you have a lived experience of having those big feelings and feeling like I need help. Because I think that's what motivates us later, right? Is being like, I've gone through a hard thing and I want to make it better for others, right? And that's what you're doing with your show, is trying to just bring more awareness to others. And yeah, I think we find our own ways of healing. That's the thing I've learned, and going through now almost 18 years of being in the education and mental health world, is that healing comes in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
And so it may be art, it may be religious counseling for some people, it may be nature for others, it may be working out and sports. Like, healing comes in so many different forms, and it's just really figuring out like what works for you, right? Like, that's really our goal, is figure out what works for each person. And that may change over time. It may be different in different eras of our lives. But I think art has been a key theme that, started when I was really little. Always did it, always painting and making things. And then in high school, it truly healed me. Like, I was able to paint things that I didn't have words for.
Right.
I was able to really get it out and process my feelings in a big way, and get out of the depression, right? And get out of it because I was able to connect with others in the same space, all making art together.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your adult life, I know we were talking a little bit before the show about practicing mindfulness, the things that you do for yourself. That way you can be your best self for Lucero. You can be your best self for the kids that you work with. So can you tell us a little bit about your daily practices? Really anything you're focused on, self-care, self-betterment.
Yes. So people sometimes joke, they're like, Meagan, how are you so high energy, or how are you so happy? And I'm like, actually, I'm just being myself. But I think it's mindfulness. Like, if it's anything, it's probably the mindfulness. So I'm a huge fan of 5 senses mindfulness and sensory mindfulness. I'm not someone that can just sit and close my eyes in a dark room and try to go blank. Like, that did not work for me. I think because I do have some trauma history, like it just was not the right fit for me. And there's all kinds of mindfulness and meditation. So I like to focus on the senses. And so ever since 2012, I've been practicing daily mindfulness. One of the things I do is just go outside and I focus on one sense at a time. And so I'll say, what do I hear in this environment? What do I smell? What do I see? And I'll just slow down and take that little moment. I started really doing this on the way between my door and my car, wherever I was. So every time I walk to my car, I do a mindfulness walk every time. And I just notice, what am I noticing? What's in the environment? What can I see? And I started doing that and realizing I had been missing out on so much. Like, oh my gosh, there's this beautiful blue sky. There's this cool cloud. There's a tiny flower. There's a squirrel. All of these beautiful things are around me. And I was just so focused on the car, I had been missing them. And slowly, after this daily practice, year after year, your brain just changes. Mm-hmm. And so now I don't have to think like, oh, I should practice mindfulness. I just do it. I just live this way, right? I notice beautiful things all the time because I've trained my brain to do that. And so I'm happier because I'm seeing all these beautiful things all the time. Yeah. It's just a natural thing that's happened, and it's so awesome. And it helps when you're having a hard time to be able to slow down and try to check in and notice what you're feeling too, right?
Yeah.
So it can be helpful in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I can only imagine, I mean, just taking the time to notice all the beautiful things. And, you know, because sometimes I feel like we're so caught up in the go and the work and the next email and the next phone call and everything else, taking a second, because I practice that as well, taking a second just to collect yourself and, you know, take a walk outside and notice the trees. And like you said, everything, notice the smells, notice the air on your face. I mean, it really can do so much for one's mind and being the absolute best self you can be, especially in the space that you work, because I know that you have worked very closely with a lot of victims and things of that nature. And so I want to talk about your work with survivors in Uvalde, with the Uvalde Love Project. So that sounds incredibly impactful. And what influence? So I want you to talk about your work with Uvalde, and then how do you feel like that experience influences your perspective on mental health resources for youth? Mm-hmm.
So I'm just so grateful to my good friend, Wanda Montemayor, who was, you know, one of the visionary behind the Uvalde Love Project. And I was able to be her buddy every step of the way. We were so impacted by the loss in Robb Elementary School, and we saw it in Austin, and we wanted to make a difference. And so we drove down there together. She's a wonderful art therapist, epic artist too. She created all this beautiful art in town. But we drove down there and we met with community leaders. And I think that's really a key part of the process. Anytime we're doing mental health community work is don't be someone on the outside coming in and saying, I'm going to fix you. Like, that's not how this works. So we went and talked to the community leaders and said, what do you need? Mm-hmm. Just tell us what you need and we'll see if we can help try to make that happen. And so through these conversations, hours of conversations, we realized that they needed more group therapy, and they needed more art therapy and play therapy for the children. And so some of these children were survivors and some were siblings. And then we also thought about the teachers, right? Because we had both been teachers ourselves and we know the power of a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so we connected with teachers and started this year-long project to make a giant mosaic tile mural, giant, like 40 feet long, out of handmade mosaic tiles. Wow. So over a series of a year, we would all have these sessions where we would come together and just make tiles, and people would write messages on them, and people would stamp them and make animals and make flowers. And we put it all together in this big, beautiful mural.
That's beautiful.
And it was the process of coming together as a community, repeatedly coming together. And the process of just letting the healing happen instead of diagnosing someone and treating them and feeling like there's a pathology and what are your symptoms? Like, we did none of that as therapists. Mm-hmm. Instead, we just said, what's right with you?
Yeah.
Right? You still have strengths that you can bring to this space. What are those strengths, right? You're going through a hard time and there's someone else at the table that can listen to you, and their strengths may be able to help you. So really what was amazing about it was that we let go and we let the people in the room connect, and we had space for art making and true connection. And we ate tacos, and they would play Selena and they would dance, and they just had true, authentic connection and time together. And I saw so much healing take place, and it is completely transformed my entire life. Wow. Like I say this authentically. It has changed my entire life, seeing somebody go through the most horrific trauma and seeing them get better. And when I think about those teachers and how they got better because they relied on their strengths and because they had each other. Yes. And it was not something that a therapist was going to do to them, right? It was something that was within them, mm-hmm. that we helped create a space, and then that was able to come out.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I think that, that was such a terrible, terrible incident, and being able to just support one another and, create something beautiful, and being able to just feel, I can only imagine the energy and just the love that was in that project, Uvalde Love Project. And so
yes.
I can only imagine how that completely changed everything for you. And I think that's just so amazing that you took the initiative to go down there and help. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. And it was a team effort, and it took a lot of work from Community Arts, which is like the team of folks that all collaborated to do this. And I think though it shows like you can dream big, right? You can have a big idea. Like, let's do something for a year. Let's not just do a one and done project, right? Let's commit to a full year, and it ended up being a year and a half even.
Yeah.
And that's what it inspired me even in Lucero, because I thought, well, if we can do this big thing here, I can do it over here. And it sort of started to build. And that's been kind of a theme of my life, is like, don't be afraid to just go big.
Yeah.
Like, just if you have a dream, you have a vision, and you have the passion, like, go for it.
Yeah.
And it's been working out.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And you describe, building a mental health collective. So what qualities or values do you seek in potential collaborators, whether it be with Lucero or any of the other work that you do?
I love this question, because I'm like, you're part of the mental health collective right now.
I know.
Like,
I love it.
I'm like, you're it.
Yes.
I think the key is authenticity. Like, bring yourself and your authentic strengths. Like, we all have strengths, and we're not all going to be the same. And that's awesome. So I love diversity and authenticity. I love compassion, right? Compassion absolutely is one of the biggest things that changed my life. Learning self-compassion, learning compassion from others. And then I think hope, right? We've got to just not give up on hope, knowing that no matter how hard it gets, no matter how dark it gets, like, there is still light, and there is still something beautiful to notice, right?
Absolutely. And how can, if an organization or an individual wants to get involved directly with Lucero or any of your other broader initiatives, how would they go about that?
Well, number one step, get our app, right? It's free. It's on the App Store. We have a free version open. We've got 20,000 people that are getting better, that are already on it and loving it. So I would say go to the App Store, get Lucero, Lucero, and try it out, right? And see what you can take from it, right? There's over 900 strategies. It's totally free. Like, why would you not do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I told you, I am definitely going to be sharing it with my little cousins. They're in high school and middle school. And thankfully, my aunt is very good about opening the conversation and making the space for those hard times and maybe things that they don't quite understand just yet. But I think that we should take advantage of every tool and everything that Lucero has to offer, for sure. So looking ahead, what are your hopes for the mental health landscape, the future of mental health care, especially in underserved communities?
So my big vision is that we start to see huge changes, and we start to see them earlier. And so we need to get more excited about preventative and subclinical and non-traditional ways of healing. I really believe that, right? We've tried the medical model of healing and healthcare, and it's not giving us the results that we want, right? The system's pretty broken. And so what we're doing right now, even at Lucero right now today, is that we are vision casting. We are starting to imagine a different type of future, and we're building out the next phase of our company to do just that. We are imagining a world where people can get access prenatal, like before the baby's born, to absolutely incredible mental health resources. Like, we want to start all the way there, and then support them all the way through 25. And so we're expanding that idea of mental health doesn't have to wait for a crisis. We can start with skill building. Mental health is for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, I am so, so excited for you. I'm so excited for Lucero. I know it's going to help so many people, so many children. And like you said, let's start early. Let's educate before the crisis happens so that we're all, just best equipped to help each other and to be resources for each other. So I am just so excited for everything you're going to continue doing and everything you have done and Lucero has done. I find it so, so inspiring because we've both said it's such a critical thing to open the conversation and create the space. And that's exactly what you're doing. And so I just want to say thank you so much for everything you've done and for being on the show today. You were absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on, Meagan.
Thank you so much. Lucero means bringer of light. And I just see that light in your eyes. Like I see that being you too. So just thank you for sharing the space with me. It was so great to connect and you're so awesome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. That was such a great compliment coming from you. So yes, connect with Meagan. She is on LinkedIn. Get the Lucero app and start making the change right here at home. Tell your friends, friends, and let's make the waves here. So yes, thank you so much for coming on, Meagan. I really appreciate it.